Okay, for the second time today, I shall read chapter 2 of The Princess and the Private. Princess Cadence formulated a response to Sterling Spear's inquiry after a few thoughtful seconds. Celestia just sat back and smiled at her attempt to play matchmaker for the youngsters. I have been informed that you were a student in the historical literature at the Huffington College of Liberal Studies, and I have a burning question for you on a little excerpt from one of the old agrarian age poems in a book I own. Of course, said book, while it existed, was not necessary for Cadence to remember or recite from memory the epic poem. She was simply giving the stallion a test to prod his knowledge. Yes, Princess, I am familiar with some poetry of that age. Sterling nodded with his typical curt stare. Is there a particular poem you wish to expound on? Cadence smirked to herself invisibly. If this stallion was as well read as Celestia made him out to be, he would immediately recognize the script. First, why don't I just start reciting it? You can guess as to which poem I am talking about, my noble stallion. The sandy steed had to keep back his groan of frustration. He despised playing guessing games, and he wished that Cadence would just ask him the question and get over with. Well, please, Princess, continue. Cadence smiled and cleared her throat to get the right pitch and mood set. Once after she had done so, she threw out her hoof dramatically, doing her best to act out the scene in a way that would do the author some justice. Hark! The mist strangles the quiet mountain countryside. Sterling gave his response not even a second thought, cutting off the princess before she could continue any further. I believe that you are referring to The Surf Song by Grassy Grove. Am I correct? The princess's hoof met the ground with a thud as her jaw unhinged. Did he just correctly name the poem and its creator without so much as 8 words of the few hundred lines in the work entailed? It wasn't even the beginning, or near the end, where he could nearly distinguish it from the other poems. Why, yes, Sterling, that was exactly what it was. She was impressed. Scratch that. She was very, very impressed. She took a glance back at Celestia and gave her a quiet whisper of appreciation, to which the white mare simply grinned back at her in an "I told you so" manner. With reverent disinterest in the current conversation, Sterling addressed the pink alicorn once again. Will that be all, Princess Cadence? The flustered filly whipped her head around to Sterling and bashfully shuffled her hoof in place, although, with his unrivaled masculinity and unflinching soulful stare, she thought it would be impossible to be more attracted to the strapping colt. The feeling increased tenfold at his literary savvy. Oh, actually, I haven't asked you my question about it yet, Sterling, she quickly rambled on to keep him from taking off prematurely. This is where the real interview began, and she was hoping that he would have a lot more to say about the next one. What would you say is the message that Grassy Grove is trying to convey with this poem? The black-maned pony made a deceptive sigh as if he were concentrating heavily on the question. However, it was a well-masked display of uncaring and unfeeling. His father had thrown him into that school because they had donated a hefty amount of workout equipment to their personal facilities to the Royal Guard Academy. They were some of the highest quality pieces of gear in the land, but Sterling had felt it was a poor excuse for making him go through 5 years of rubbish classes he was subjected to. His competitive spirit was compelled him to exceed his peers, which he obviously did, but that was where the stock in the school ended. He was glad to be finally out. The Surf Song, I would say, is a harrowing tale of pleasant life, rife in satire against the privileged classes of pessimism concerning the serfs' ability to gain equality from the masters. It was mostly a warning to future generations to oppose feudalism, as it had destroyed the lives of many for the benefits of the few. The next thing Cadence knew, she was being supported by a white wing on one side. She felt giddy, lightheaded, and most of all, relieved that she had finally found somebody who appreciated fine literature as much as she had. The pink mare was completely and utterly weak in the knees from the silky smooth voice of this wonderful, articulate stallion not but a few feet away. She looked up at Celestia, who had saved her from a fainting spell. The alabaster pony had a comical look on her regal face, denoting what Cadence probably looked like at the time, a sloppy mess on her wing. Once Cadence realized that her vulnerable position, she righted herself briskly and readjusted the golden crown on her head. She was thankful that Sterling's spear didn't seem to register and he flopped to the ground. In fact, he was taking glances at the training grounds, where he was probably either due back for another race or anxious to monitor the techniques of his opposition, always on the hunt for new obstacles to hurdle or fresh meat to belittle. "That was great, Sterling. I couldn't have said it better myself, although I may have had a different interpretation." His icy green gaze slanted back to the Princess Cadence as she continued to speak with him. He was starting to wonder why she was out here in the first place. Shouldn't he be doing something more princessy, like trying on new outfits or gossiping with her noble male friends? What part did you like most about the poem, Sterling?" Cadence went into a gushing state, wanting to recount everything she loved about Grassy Grove's work, and that of every other classic poet for the matter. "I like the part where the father, son, and the tailor's daughter profess their love for each other. It was so romantic." The hard look on Sterling's face was difficult to read, a perfect cover for the slightest sneer the princess's last statement elicited from him. "Romance? Love? Ugh. Those were merely inhibitors for things that truly mattered, such as striving for excellence and superiority." The ambitious stallion did, however, have a favorite theme from that wretched poem, which resonated with him that very day. "I tend to favor the more action-oriented scenes, such as the fall of the prince's castle, where the peasants exacted vengeance on the nobility for an unforgivable tax in the best way possible." Sterling's eyes momentarily lit up passionately at the remembrance, "by driving him out through brute force and defacing the statues of their oppressors." Even though the admission was a tad unsettling, Cadence was just glad that he had shown some enthusiasm for the work, which he had not for the whole time they were conversing. "Well," she started, at a loss for what to say at his possibly misguided zeal, "I'm so glad that you enjoyed it either way." A similar pattern followed the next hour or so, with Cadence effervescently listing off who she thought were great writers and poets of all time, and Sterling, wanting to put his sword through his chest at the never-ending prattle, but respectfully listening to what he deemed was appropriate feedback whenever she asked something. He still hadn't explained why she was still here. Her question had been answered. Why couldn't she just come out with it? Sterling thanked the heavens when Cadence suddenly realized that she would need to return to the castle very soon, no doubt, as the stallion thought, to commence with other activities just as meaningless. However, he wasn't expecting the next question to bubble up from the immediately attractive Mary's lips. I suppose I could get to the reason why I'm here in the first place. I know that the captain, your father, has expressed misgivings about what I'm about to propose, and I hope that he will find it in his heart to forgive Princess Celestia and I for asking you this. I can't let this opportunity pass me by." The pink mare stepped a little closer to the Broughorn colt, who eased back slightly at the invasion of his personal space, though not enough to seem rude. There was a slight darkening of her cheeks as she did so, which Sterling observed passively. "Sterling Spear, I hereby officially request that you become a suitor for my hoof in marriage. If you wish to decline, that is acceptable, but I do not request this of just any pony. I see something in you that is severely lacking from most of the stallions I have ever known. And on top of that," Cadence felt her mouth go dry and gulped a bit, "I think you are very cute. Would you do me the honor of becoming my candidate, Sterling?" "Cute? Cute? Why not dashing? Why not glorious? Heck, even beautiful would have been less insulting than that." Sterling inwardly fumed in awkward self-consciousness. Now it's not the time to be enraged by that, as Varla was. This princess, a princess of Equestria, had just asked him to become an eligible suitor for her affection, admiration, but more importantly, the power that the royal family had held over all of creation. Screw the first two. That was an offer rank and prestige that would surely bring him closest to his lifelong dreams. One of which was A rule equestria with an iron hoof. Not reading that paragraph. And don't ask about the paragraph. Shaking his head to clear the perverse notions, he came back to the real world, watching Cadence wait for an instant with anticipation. Time to put... No. Phew. Sorry. Time to put his plans into action, it seemed. I would be humbled and I would be most humbled and willing, Your Grace. He genuflected low to the ground. Cadence stifled a squeak of delight she desperately wished to admit. That's outstanding, Sterling. Please just call me Cadence from now on. It would be kind of weird to have a cold friend address me so formally. I would love it if you could accompany me for dinner tonight as a first step in courtship. After all this wasted time, better spent on things less trivial, Sterling didn't dare say no to ruin this once-in-a-lifetime chance. He put on the best happy smile he possibly could, which somehow morphed back to his simple, flirtatious smirk. Happiness wasn't one of his stronger suits. I would love that, Cadence. The princess's name rolled off his tongue naturally. Well, it certainly would when you're a Stalin who wishes to become a prince. Wonderful! I'll send the guards to pick you up at your home, right? Well, the barracks, actually. Yes, Cadence, that is correct. Cadence turned round slightly to gesture that she needed to be off, but not without a shy wave of her hoof. So long for now, sweetie. Willpower, Sterling! Willpower, sweetie! He never before felt such a combination of fury and stomach gurgles as he nearly lurched forward to throttle her. I'll see you at dinner, honey. Cadence giggled to herself at the pet name. He was obviously crushing on her. He just had to be. As Princess Cadence and Celestia turned to continue their journey back to the castle, Sterling punched himself across the face, willing the bottle in his tongue to go away after all he had just forced himself to say. All for the crown, it's all for the crown. When the team race right of earshot, Cadence whispered delightedly to Celestia, Oh, Aunt Celestia, I should have you locked up for not introducing me to that gorgeous hunk sooner. Celestia just laughed the joke off, all the while feeling a hint of smugness. Liked what we saw, did we? Oh, we liked. Candace played along. We liked a lot. Sterling simply huffed, rather annoyed at how he handled the situation, but realized that climbing to the top sometimes meant debasing oneself every once in a while. He trotted back to the training fields to resume his ritualistic cool sessions by beating any pony and everybody to hoof and flight races. As Sterling's Spear returned to the field of honor, he spotted a new, yet familiar face on the sidelines, one that represented every single thing that he wished to conquer and grind into the dust. The feelings had all left for the day, leaving him, his fellow soldiers, aptly dubbed his cronies, and one lonesome unicorn stallion, sniffing at the daisies and talking to the grass. The mathematics of this situation could not have been more perfect. Well, if it isn't shining armor, he heckled the white unicorn. I thought you'd be impersonating a tree in the forest and wasting your time with all those knickknacks you call art in your dorm. Shining armor looked up from the ground at the brazen Pegasus, fearful of the potential harm for the captain's son inflicted on him. He stepped back slightly as the other older pony guards took note of his presence, came closer to assist Sterling in picking on. Yeah! One of them snorted stupidly. Where's your little clarinet armor? Why don't you play us a song to beat you up to? Come on, guys, Shining Armor quivered. I don't want any trouble. Sterling had been hoping to catch Armor around the training grounds today. After the atrocious talk he had had with the princess, he was itching to gain back some of his masculinity. And what better way to get 4 ponies, including himself, gathered together to wail on one meek, spineless bison. Sorry, Armor, but it looks like trouble has just found you. As it always seems to, Sterling sneered gleefully. As Armor retreated slowly, his comrades drew closer and closer, trying to keep at least one step faster than Armor, till he spun away. Turned out the predictable pattern repeated itself, and Armor was running in the opposite direction like his life depended on it. Like trained dogs on the hunt for foxes, Sterling and his crew pursued the unicorn. He was pretty fast for a weakling, but the light brown pony wouldn't be satisfied until he had gotten at least 1 or 2 hits on this mobile training dummy. Armor was attempting to hide in a nearby thicket of trees, but as Sterling unsheathed his wings and started to bullet at high speed, the would elude the poor colt, as Pegasus, to use his singer, had somehow found a great elation in roughing him up at every chance he got, and this time would be no different. Sterling tackled Armor around his waist, evoking a sharp grunt of pain from the hapless pony that skidded to the grass-covered plain. The Pegasus triumphantly cackled as he started, smacking and punching Armor before the other blockheads could join in the action. They soon did, however, doing a number on the lonesome stallion. They didn't want to kill him. They just wanted to do enough to vent their daily problems on an undeserving target. As per Shining Armor's style, he never fought back. Of course, he would just urge his fellows to get along and live in harmony, as he was doing now. Please, guys, smack. Can't we punch? Talk about this? What's wrong? Kick? Why are you always so angry? Smack all the time. They ignored him, like always, and continued until he was sufficiently tenderized. Armor groaned in unbridled pain, though nothing was broken, and it usually never was. It stung pretty badly. The thing that hurt him most, however, was how Sterling and his posse could not find the inner peace, and instead resorted to violent beings to calm and torment his feelings inside of them. Satisfied with the miseries they had called the unicorn, Sterling wanted the others to leave him alone and that he had had enough for now. He hovered over the battered body of Shining Armor, leering down at him threateningly. And remember, you dirty hippie, if you squeal on a standing pony, we'll make sure you get it even harder next time. With a dominant snore of derision, Sterling finally got up, telling his friends to get out of here before any pony saw them, and did the same. Now Sherry was alone. Shining Armor sighed sadly. He truly felt sorry for the ponies, who had nothing better to do than hurt each other. He was reminded of an awful story he had read just recently in the news about 2 young colts in Manhattan that had been killed by a large group, supposedly a gang, just because one of the gang members had not liked the look one of the colts had gave him. It had been a brutal slaughter, one that made Shining Armor inconsolable for days. When faced with a depressed Armor, his roommate would badger him. "What's the big deal, Armor? Crud like that happens every day. It's just the media trying to upsell their newspapers." Such sensitivity toward Armor's already fragile emotions. How could ponies blow off something so tragic as if it were nothing at all? Though, if what is... Okay. Though, if what his roommate said was true, how could the newspaper companies inform the public on such adversities only for the sole purpose of gaining exposure and making more bits? This world of Shining Armor, which he could be optimistic, could stand to gain a lot more compassion. These were the reasons that Armor tried to live in his life as quiet, humble, and non-intrusive as he possibly could, and study up on the great thinkers and artists of positive wisdom. There were the wisdom to make this world a better place for every pony. In his current state, he couldn't move very much, and even less so was able to stand and walk it off. Therefore, he decided to sleep it off for a few hours. Hopefully, no pony would find him sprawled out half dead and be suspicious as to why. His luck ran out later, an hour when a gruff old voice entered his ears, waking him up at his home. "Wake up, Private! You can't have new recruits napping out on the training grounds." It sounded familiar, but he couldn't quite pinpoint the tone. Wasn't one of the teachers at the academy? He opened his eyes, still in considerable amount of pain, once the dreamlike state was interrupted. The cerulean eyes of the unicorn bore back up from the old black eyes of, ironically, Sterling Spear's distinguished father. Captain Boardlance? Shining Armor tried to rise to and regard the old warrior with reverence. "Don't bother getting up yet, son," Broadlance applied, mortification clear in his features. "Looks like my boy had really roughed you up good this time." "Please, Captain, what's my fault? I got ambushed by Manticore in the woods." The old Pegasus threw a pearly white hoof up to hush the pirate. "I wouldn't bother with all the tall tales, Shining Armor. I know my ill-tempered son work when I see it." Armor just rested there, not wanting to meet the apologetic eyes of the captain. After a few minutes, Broadlance decided it was time to get Armor out of there. Here you go, Private. I'll help you back to your barracks. Yes, said the young unicorn admiringly, making him wince with anguish. Walk it off, kid. Just walk it off. Rod Lance supported the wobbly armor as he synchronized the steps with the injured lads, making sure not to push him too hard that he break something. They wandered the field for some while, but the captain spoke his mind. How do you keep getting yourselves into this situation, son? You really ought to fight back when he does this nonsense. That's what you all are here for, to be tough. Armor couldn't walk and talk at the same time without stabs of pain, so he paced his words carefully as he shook his head. I couldn't do that, Captain. These are my friends, my brothers in arms. The old pony had a stiff reply. Friends don't beat each other up, Armor. You gotta learn that to make it into the guard. You have to be ready to fight at a moment's notice, even if that means the ponies you care about, and hang out with and care about. Another minute of silence enveloped them for a second before Armor started again. Captain, why is Sterling Spear so angry all the time? Broadland sighed, as if he had a bit for every pony who asked him the same question. Sterling is troubled, Armor. Sure, he's intelligent, strong, and quick-witted young stallion, but I'm afraid that I pushed him too hard when he was young sometimes, so now he thinks that everything is something to be conquered, dominated, and he won't stop until, well, he just won't stop. There will always be something in his life that he demands that he rise on top of it, and it does worry me every so often. They ended up sitting on the bench near the track, and Armor couldn't handle any more stress on his bruised legs. The old Pegasus continued in their saddles. Sometimes I wish you were more like you, friendlier, more understanding of different lifestyles, and less less a megalomaniac. So I've been in the large school trying to make him see things from different points of view. Unfortunately, he just uses synology games to devise strategy for overtaking more and more things. I'm surprised he hasn't gone after the princesses and the crown with that kind of self-serving determination. Oh, dude, you have no idea. The white unicorn took the entire story, finding the information both enlightening but very despairing as well. They started walking over some more after a while, taking a step at a time. Armor was feeling a bit better as the joints warmed up and the pain stalled away. Not every pony in Equestria is capable of charity, as you'd like to believe, Armor, the old captain explained as they kept walking. I've tried everything I can to make my son more so, and you'll have nothing to do with it. It was a hard pill for Shining Armor to swallow, but as he rested on his captain's shoulder while they walked, he had to admit that there were plenty of other ponies out there willing to lie, cheat, and steal the way to happiness. In Sterling's case, to conquest, that meant preying on those who wish the best for Equestria. Just one more reason for Armor to want to help change the world for the good of ponykind. Next day, Princess Cadence decided to take an afternoon stroll through the forest to the Royal Guard barracks. To her, it was the best way to get away from the tiring high society life she was expected to be a part of, while also being close to her bodyguards just in case something dangerous were to jump out at her. She basked in the warm tranquility, birds chirping in the distance and leaves rustling all around. The sounds of nature were welcoming compared to the hustle and bustle of the castle she had left behind. Last night she had been spectacular as she had hoped. Sterling Spear was everything an American could ever want in a husband. Polite, pragmatic, assertive, and incredibly dashing. They shared many conversations about typical dating topics, such as their personal and professional goals, what they typically look at in a relationship. You may go on so far to state as how many children they would wish to have one day. Of course, it seemed as if the thought of children upset Sterling somehow. Now that Cadence thought about it. There were a few things off about Sterling's behavior that usually didn't come up with most of it with other stallions. There were some topics Cadence had tried asking him about that made Sterling somewhat uneasy. Some were fairly understandable, such as not wanting to talk about his father, as if he didn't really like him all that much. Something most stallions would often admit to. Others were a little suspicious, though, like if he were to ask about on a date, where would it most likely be? He had answered in a very non-committal way, and the local would be on a battlefield. To which he quickly apologized and wasn't good at picking romantic activities, and Cadence had just laughed it off as if it all were forgiven. He just didn't seem that interested in her personally. This is icing on the cake, however. When it came around to dinner time, when Cadence spent flying her soup, it was so sweet of Sterling to bring the waiter over to inform him of the mistake, whereas Candace had told him not to worry about it. It was not so sweet, however, when they started arguing about it. "I'm sorry, sir," the dignified waiter had drawled to Sterling, "but the fly must have landed in the soup some time after I brought it out. As I saw nothing in it before." "How dare you!" Sterling had started to lose his temper after the court had refused his demand to fetch a pink bear another soup clean of insects. It wasn't more about the soup or Cadence anymore, as much as it was the waiter. As it was the waiter not bending to his will. "You will go back there and bring this lady a fresh bowl, or I'll make sure that I never work in the city ever again." As exciting as Sterling was to Cadence, being so passionate about something so small just for her was quite the turn on. His intensity would have blown the waiter's brains out if he had stared into his eyes long enough. There was a certain point where the assertiveness bled into straight out right controlling, and Sterling had seemed to cross the line just right away, sir." The waiter wasted not a single moment appeasing Sterling's anger, to which Sterling cooled down, though not without a see that you're more prompt next time. Otherwise, the date ended up being very nice, and Cadence was already making more plans to go out with Sterling soon. She was really convinced that she had possibly found a brave knight with whom she shared her life with, and daydreamed about all of his handsome stoic glory. A male voice in the woods immediately snapped Cadence out of her reverie, making her hide in a nearby bush trying to locate which direction the voice had come in. "Please, you two, you have to believe me. I didn't do it. Whoever it was, they were kind of whiny and pathetic, like one of the children she had forced at many years ago." She poked her head out of the bush in the direction she thought she heard the cry. As she did, she took in a caustic sight. Two large, medium ponies, one Earth and one Pegasus, one Oakland, and white unicorn stallion with two turned dark blue and aquaman with a dark navy blue stripe. He definitely wasn't a slouch in the looks department, though nowhere near the level of her darling Spear. As this was the forest right outside the guard barracks, these three must have been trainees, or recruits, or possibly even higher, for the Royal Guard. She listened in, hiding herself inside, not wanting to get caught up in the scuffle at her. Don't give it those horse apples." Shining Armor, the Earth Pony shouted, enraged way beyond healthy. Broadlands put jagged grits on latrine duty for a whole month because of you squealer. No, meek unicorn. No, Shining Armor. Repeated pleadingly. "He just gave me a lift back to the barracks. I swear I didn't tell him about anything. You guys did?" "Oh yeah, he found it somehow." A thin yet ripped Pegasus supported his friend, curling his lip in sarcastic malice. He could have just woken up one day. "Oh, I bet Dragon Quest beat up Shining Armor today." "It wasn't me." Armor's eyes filled with fearful tears as the two bullies still closer to the punching bag. "Hey guys, you gotta believe me." The Earth Pony suddenly shot a hoof at the unicorn's face, making its head reel to the side, knocking to the ground with a rough thud. Cadence cringed at such a violent display, feeling it sorry for the outnumbered pony. She was about to go over and chew them out, but didn't want any pony to know she was in the forest to begin with. So he just winced every time a hoof would land in its desired spot shining on his body. Luckily, the threat of worse beatings from yesterday was not upheld. The two ruffians were satisfied with Armor had started whimper with pain, still recovering from the attack yesterday, too. The Earth Pony got up in Armor's face and yelled one last time and grinned horribly. "I'm going to tell every pony at the barracks what you did. You'll never be able to go outside again without being made fun of." He laughed condescendingly as he gave Armor's face a playful yet heavy slap. Retreating from the wooded area back to the dorms, not wanting to get caught in the scene of the crime, the forest became unnaturally quiet again, save for the squirming and light sobs of the poor unicorn. Cadence, while completely flabbergasted at their behavior, began to wonder why the heck Armor didn't even try to fight back at least once. I suppose he was being some kind of prospective guard recruit. Wasn't he? Fighting is what guards are good for, and good at in the majority of cases. She didn't want to sound mean by this, but what a wimp! She also, as she came out into the clearing where Armor lay to ask him about that, she ducked back suddenly when he rolled over in a hurry, they finding something very wrong with his position. As she decided to peek again at the scene, Cadence and Shining Armor were both horrified to find the helpless body of a cardinal. Body sprawled out after the unicorn had knocked it to the ground on top of it. It was still alive, thankfully, but it had suffered severe trauma to the wings. It would need veterinary attention right away if it were to heal fully. "I'm so sorry." Shining Armor could have blubbered at the pitiful sight in front of him. If only he could have watched who he was falling. No time for regret. He had to act faster, or else the frail wings of the little cardinal would snap. "It's going to be all right. Just try not to move too much." If there's one thing Shining Armor was thankful to be in the guard for, it would have to be his extensive training in first aid. He didn't have a whole lot on at the moment, but he spotted some long, thin wood chips sticking out of a tree next to him. He used his magic to pry them off and hover over them over their positions. However, without any weapons for the makeshift splints, he plucked some long stems of grass from the field behind him, and once again hopping these over. Cadence watching their thing unfold with rapt attention. For being part of the Royal Guard, this stallion was awfully considerate, even to something as small and weak as a bird. She hadn't known too many guards who would have ever noticed they'd fallen on a little creature, let alone give it the tender care Shining Armor was. "It's okay, little one," Armor hummed to it as it tried to squirm away from the large, scary unicorn. We're just gonna tie this around, and there you go, all done. He righted the little bird gently, making sure it's comfortable with the treatment, and put it back up in its tree. Presumably, its nest was resting on a thick tree branch. With these splints, he'll be flying again in no time at all. The touched alicorn would have come out of a hiding spot and to praise the colt for his kindness until she heard him say something to Cardinal. It was a small excerpt from a poem, one that Cadence never thought in a million years any pony in this time period would have been aware of. What was even more stunning was the language in which he interpreted it. There had been translation for the work in the modern tongue, but Shining Armor was speaking the original older question, a language that was unintelligible to all but the most learned scholars. The words reverberated through very core as we started leveling to the cardinal. With these wings I shall soar, above pain, injustice, and heartbreak. Many would clip them, many would break them, but none can destroy them. One day I'll fly higher than the tallest mountain can reach, or the mortal concerns extinguish. It is then that I may truly be free. Never had the princess ever witnessed something when falling at the moon. Every word was uttered from the heart, and somehow it had related to the cold stone repressed life. It was as if the stallion and the cardinal were on some hidden wavelength that cadence cannot access. The bird tripping happily to its new friend, and armor subsequently chuckling at its antics. She had found herself uncomfortable at the realization, almost jealous. The bowl of honey was not aware that she was holding her breath and expelled in a long sigh. Whoa, shining armor could swear he heard some pony or something just exhale. He relaxed his state. His relaxed state becoming a tad more jittery and apprehensive. Is someone there? Me and my big mouth. Cadence reprimanded herself on the bush where a cover is blowing. May as well let him know she's here. She stepped out in the clearing with a regal flair. She was a princess after all, and she couldn't give off the impression that she'd been sneaking around. As she made her presence known to Shining Armor, he was shocked to find a pony he wouldn't expect to enjoy the woodland scenery as he did. Princess Cadence? End of chapter 2.